You are standing on the stone quay at La Rochelle long after sunset, when the port should have been settling into routine silence. Yet something feels wrong. The tide is high. The wind is steady. Ships sit low in the water, heavier than they should be at this hour, their hulls creaking softly, as if impatient. By morning, every one of them will be gone. Not damaged, not delayed. Gone so completely that no wreckage will ever surface, no survivor will ever testify, and no official record will ever admit where they sailed. 7 centuries later, the question still hangs in the air like mist over dark water. How does an entire fleet vanish in a single night, leaving nothing solid enough to blame on the sea, the king, or even chance itself? The urgency begins to loosen its grip now. The sharp edges of that question soften, and the pace slows, inviting you to breathe more evenly, to step back from the noise of speculation, and into a quieter space where the past does not shout, but waits. You remain at the harbor, letting the details settle around you. The smell of salt and pitch lingers in the air. Lantern light trembles across the surface of black water. La Rochelle, in the early 14th century, was not a forgotten port on the edge of Europe. It was a financial artery, a strategic outlet, and quietly the most important maritime gateway controlled by the Knights Templar. These were not the romantic figures later painted into legend. They were administrators, bankers, and logisticians, men who understood timing, contingency, and discretion with professional precision. When they moved ships, they did so with intent. You already know how their public story ends, or at least how it is usually told. Arrest warrants issued in silence, confessions drawn out in cold rooms, fires constructed carefully beam by beam. Yet the ships refuse to fit that ending. They leave before the trap closes. They depart as if someone had spoken a warning at exactly the right moment, quietly, efficiently, without drama. You can almost imagine it, a messenger arriving late, breath shallow, a seal pressed into warm wax, a single instruction passed from ear to ear. Sail. Tonight. There is an odd calm to this mystery, and even a faint trace of irony if you allow yourself a tired smile. History is filled with chaotic collapses, yet here is an order facing destruction that pauses to pack properly, check the weather, and slip out through the back door. No speeches, no heroic last stand, just competence, almost impolite in its efficiency. Before we venture further into the shadows, take a moment to subscribe so you never miss a secret that history has tried to forget. Let the harbor fade behind you. The ropes are already cast off. The fleet is already moving. You remain by the harbor, but time begins to slide backward, smoothing the water and rebuilding the noise that once lived here. La Rochelle, at dusk in the autumn of 1307, was not dramatic in the way later painters imagined it. It was practical, busy, and faintly impatient. The port functioned as a machine, and machines do not pause for legend. Stone quays were crowded with barrels, coils of rope crates stamped with merchants' marks, and sailors who moved with the efficient boredom of men repeating familiar tasks. This matters because disappearances rarely succeed in chaos. They succeed in routine. Historically, La Rochelle was the principal Atlantic port under Templar control, a fact rarely disputed by serious scholars. The order had been granted extensive privileges here decades earlier, including warehouses, docking rights, and exemption from certain tolls. You can picture the Templar banner hanging quietly above administrative buildings, rather than fluttering heroically from battlements. This was not a fortress of crusading glory. It was a logistics hub. Ships came and went, constantly carrying wine, salt, wool, pilgrims' letters, and money. In such a place, movement did not automatically attract attention. That is the first key. As evening settled, the fleet would not have looked like a fleet in the theatrical sense. Contemporary references suggest a loose collection of vessels, rather than a single formation cogs carracks, and smaller support ships suited for coastal and open water travel. The exact number remains debated, with estimates ranging from a handful to more than a dozen. The absence of consensus is not a failure of scholarship so much as a clue. If records disagree even on how many ships left, it suggests that whatever departed did so under conditions designed to blur counting, not clarify it. One well-established detail anchors this reconstruction. Medieval ports closed their gates at night, but ships already cleared for departure could leave on the tide without further inspection. Harbor masters relied on paperwork completed earlier in the day, not midnight roll calls. If documents were prepared in advance, and if no cargo appeared overtly suspicious, the physical act of sailing required little ceremony. You can imagine a clerk yawning over a ledger, unaware that his routine entries would later become the silence historians argue over. More obscure and more controversial is the question of who exactly gave the final signal. Some historians argue that local Templar commanders acted autonomously, reading political weather better than royal messengers. Others suggest coordination from higher leadership, perhaps even from Jacques de Molay himself, though no surviving letter confirms this. The debate remains unresolved, and it hinges on timing. Orders issued too early would attract suspicion. Orders issued too late would trap the ships in port. Whoever made the decision understood that narrow window with unnerving accuracy. You can sense how deliberate the atmosphere must have been. Sailors loading late into the evening would not have seemed unusual in La Rochelle. Longshoremen were accustomed to irregular hours dictated by tides rather than clocks. Even the presence of armed brothers overseeing the process would not have raised eyebrows. Templars guarded property as a matter of course. In a port where they owned warehouses, oversight looked like habit, not alarm. There is a quiet irony here, and perhaps a small joke history never intended. Philip IV, meticulous in his financial accounting and ruthless in his legal maneuvers, was undone not by chaos, but by predictability. He understood courts' parchments and confessions. He underestimated docks, bureaucracy,